I've been a fisherman all my life. I love the feeling of the sun on my face and the wind in my hair. I love the challenge of trying to catch a fish and the excitement of when I finally do. But there's one spot where I'm always afraid to fish. It's a small cove at the end of a long beach. It's a beautiful spot, but it's also where a fisherman drowned many years ago. His name was Thomas, and he was a good friend of mine. We used to fish together all the time. One day we were fishing in the cove when a storm came up. The waves got bigger and bigger, and the wind was blowing so hard that we could barely stand up. Thomas was standing on a rock when a wave knocked him off. He fell into the water and was swept away by the current. I tried to save him, but I couldn't reach him. I never saw Thomas again. His body was never found. I've been haunted by Thomas's death ever since. I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, somewhere, watching over me. One day I decided to face my fears and fish in the cove again. I knew it was a risk, but I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't afraid. I arrived at the cove early in the morning. The sun was just rising and the water was calm. It was a perfect day for fishing. I cast my line into the water and waited. It didn't take long before I got a bite. I set the hook and reeled in my catch. It was a small fish, but it was a fish nonetheless. I was about to release the fish when I noticed something strange. It had a black mark on its side. The mark was in the shape of a hand. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew that hand. It was Thomas's hand. I dropped the fish back into the water and reeled in my line. I was too scared to fish anymore. I packed up my things and left the cove. I never went back. But the nightmares started that night. I would dream of Thomas, standing on the rock where he drowned. He would stare at me with his sad eyes, and he would point to the black mark on his side. I would wake up in a cold sweat, terrified. The nightmares got worse and worse. I was starting to lose sleep. I was starting to lose my mind. One night, I had a dream that Thomas was pulling me into the water. I was screaming and struggling, but he was too strong. He dragged me down into the depths of the ocean. I woke up with a start. I was drenched in sweat. I was so scared that I could barely breathe. I knew that I had to do something. I couldn't keep living like this. I went to the cove the next day. I stood on the rock where Thomas had drowned, and I spoke to his ghost. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Thomas," I said. "I know that you're just trying to protect me." I reached down and picked up a rock. I held it in my hand and looked at Thomas's ghost. "I'm going to release you now, Thomas," I said. "You can finally rest in peace." I threw the rock into the water. It hit the bottom with a splash. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. When I opened my eyes, Thomas's ghost was gone.
Next story.
I've been a fisherman for as long as I can remember. I love the feeling of the cool night air on my face and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. But more than anything, I love the thrill of the catch. One night, I decided to go fishing at a secluded covey that I had recently discovered. It was a beautiful spot, with clear blue water and towering cliffs. I knew that there were plenty of fish in the covey, and I was excited to catch a few. I arrived at the covey around midnight. The moon was full and the stars were shining brightly. I could see the fish swimming in the shallows, and I knew that I was going to have a good night. I cast my line into the water and waited. It didn't take long before I got a bite. I set the hook and reeled in my catch. It was a big fish, and it fought hard. But eventually I was able to land it. I was about to release the fish when I noticed something strange. It had a deep cut on its side. The cut was still bleeding, and I could see the fish's entrails hanging out. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew that this wasn't a normal cut. It looked like something had attacked the fish. I released the fish and reeled in my line. I was starting to feel uneasy. I decided to pack up my things and leave. But just as I was about to turn, I heard a noise behind me. I turned around and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness. I froze in terror. I didn't know what to do. The creature stepped out of the shadows. It was tall and slender, with pale skin and long, sharp claws. It had a wide mouth with rows of razor-sharp teeth. I screamed and turned to run. But the creature was faster. It lunged at me and knocked me to the ground. I tried to fight back, but the creature was too strong. It pinned me to the ground and opened its mouth. I could feel its hot breath on my face. I closed my eyes and waited for the end. But the end never came. I opened my eyes and saw that the creature was gone. I was lying on the ground, covered in sweat. I quickly got to my feet and ran back to my car. I didn't stop running until I got home. I never went back to that cove. I don't know what the creature was, but I knew that it was dangerous. But sometimes at night I still hear the sound of its footsteps echoing in my mind.
Next story.
I'm a fresh fisherman, about half of a year. Not yet a pro, but I had my own experiences. I love the feeling of the sun on my face and the wind in my hair. I love the challenge of trying to catch a fish and the excitement of when I finally do. But one day, I caught something that I never thought I would catch. A body. I was fishing in a small lake near my home when I felt a tug on my line. I set the hook and reeled in my catch. It was a heavy fish, and I had to fight it hard, but eventually I was able to bring it to the surface. As I got closer to the boat, I saw that it wasn't a fish at all. It was a body. The body was pale and bloated. It had been in the water for days. I could see the fish nibbling at its flesh. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to vomit. But I forced myself to stay calm. I had to get the body out of the water. I reeled in the body and brought it alongside the boat. I reached out and grabbed its arm. It was cold and clammy. I pulled the body into the boat. It was heavier than I had expected. I had to struggle to lift it. Once the body was in the boat, I took a closer look at it. It was a young man, probably in his early 20s. He had dark hair and blue eyes. He was wearing a white shirt and jeans. I didn't recognize him. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just leave the body in the boat. I had to call the police. I started up the boat's engine and headed for shore. I called the police as soon as I arrived. The police arrived a few minutes later. They took the body from the boat and placed it in a body bag. They then took me to the police station to question me. I told the police everything that had happened. I told them how I had hooked the body and how I had brought it to shore. The police thanked me for my cooperation and told me that they would be in touch. I went home that day feeling shaken and confused. I couldn't believe that I had caught a body. I couldn't believe that I had seen a dead man. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about the body. I kept thinking about the young man's blue eyes. The next day, I got a call from the police. They told me that they had identified the body. It was a young man named Michael Smith. He had been missing for several days. The police told me that they had found a suicide note in Michael's car. They told me that he had taken his own life. I was devastated. I couldn't believe that Michael had killed himself. He was such a young man with so much ahead of him. I went to Michael's funeral a few days later. It was a small funeral with only close family and friends in attendance. I didn't know Michael very well, but I felt a connection to him. After all, I had been the one to find his body. I said a prayer for Michael and his family. I hoped that he was finally at peace. I still think about Michael sometimes. I wonder what made him take his own life. I wonder what was going through his mind when he drowned himself. I'm glad that I was able to find Michael's body. I'm glad that I was able to give his family closure, but I'll never forget the day that I caught a body. It was a day that changed me forever.
As a huge support, please hit like, subscribe, and maybe share your thought or any experience before going to watch another video. Thank you so much. Have a good day.